Life YouTube channel. This is a story about finding out if you have what it takes and the guts to make it in this trade. Because not everyone that wants to be a lineman has what it takes to make it. When you first get started as an apprentice, you hope you have what it takes, but you really don't know. You're going to have to prove yourself to many linemen over and over again. You're going to have to prove yourself for years and years and years. But before you prove it to other people that you have what it takes, first, you've got to prove it to yourself. Good evening, Brother Lineman. When I went to work for my first utility, I started off as what they called a utility man. And a utility man was the lowest spot. I helped do groundwork when they needed it. I had to help the meter reader sometimes when he needed it. I had to sweep out the warehouse, had to clean off trucks. Only a certain number of slots were available to be an apprentice. And it took me almost a year and a half before a slot actually came up so I could get my apprentice slot. When some of the linemen found out that I actually was going to go to our lineman school and I got an apprentice slot, they kind of laughed at me. One guy in particular named Smokey, he told me, you know, Spooner, I'm not sure you have what it takes to make it as a lineman. My company's lineman school is in a small town called Denmark, South Carolina. Now, Denmark was named by the guys on the railroad because there was a railroad that ran through the town, and these railroad guys named certain towns after Scandinavian countries. So there's Denmark, you got Norway, you got Sweden, which are all small little towns in South Carolina. This school was out in the middle of nowhere, out in the sticks. That first day of our first week of class, 13 guys showed up. We had guys from the city, we had guys from the country, so it was a good mix of people all the way around. And as linemen do, we became fast friends pretty quickly on that first day. So the first day we did paperwork for a couple hours, and then we walked out to see our training yard where we would be doing our climbing training. Because my company, the way it was set up, the first 3 weeks was all learning how to climb, and it was spread out over a period of 3 months. So what you would do is you go to 1 week of climbing class, you go home for 3 weeks, then you come back for the second week of climbing class, and then you go home for 3 weeks again. It was set up like that for the first 3 months, once a week for the first 3 months. So we walked out into this big grassy field to take a look at what we would be, where we would be training. And it was like a typical training yard you see. There was about 15 40-foot poles in a big circle. But in the middle, what really caught your eye was there was a really, really tall pole. This pole looked to be 2 or 3 times the size of these 40-foot poles. So my instructor's name was Crick. So everybody asked Crick, "Hey Crick, how tall is that pole in the middle?" Crick replied, "Well, it's a 110-foot pole. Rumor has it there's a $20 bill stapled to the top of that pole for anybody who wants to go up there and get it." Now, I got to tell you, the testosterone was flying that first day. Everybody's going to climb that pole. Everybody's going to do this. Everybody's going to do that. You know, I'm not really much of a bragger, but I knew the second that I saw that 110-foot pole that I was going to have to prove it to myself that I had the guts to climb that pole. So the first week we got to get our tools, and which was kind of fun when you get all new climbing tools, you know, climbing equipment, your climbing belt, your safety, your hooks. We had a choice between getting climb hooks, which were replaceable gaffs, and Buckinghams, which were a fixed gaff. And for whatever reason, I was drawn to the Buckinghams. I still have those hooks, and I still climb Buckingham today if I get a chance. Now, one unusual thing about my first belt was it was a D18. Now, if you know anything about belts, the 18 part is the number of inches between the D rings. So a D18, that's pretty small. So I guess I was a skinny ass back then. I think I probably weighed about 160, 165, 5'10". I still have that belt, and I probably couldn't even get that thing around one of my legs today. But back then, It fit just right. So that first week, the goal was by Friday to get to the top of that 40-foot pole. So all we did for the first part of the week was the instructor Crick showed us how to climb. We'd climb up, we'd rotate on the pole, we'd go a little bit higher. By the Friday of the first week, he told us if we wanted to, we could attempt to go to the top of the 40-foot pole. And immediately, almost everybody went to the top, climbed to the top of that 40-foot pole just to see if they could do it. Now, there was a couple guys who, were having a little bit of trouble and couldn't get to the top of that 40 that first week. But hey, that was all right. We made it. Most of us made it to the top of the 40-foot pole. So we went back home, but we knew we would be back in 3 weeks. And as we left, that 110-foot pole, that thing kind of never left my mind. But because I knew I was going to have to climb that pole, just to prove it to myself. Again, to prove it to myself. And that first week, Crick would not let anybody attempt to climb that 110-foot pole. He goes, man, it's just too advanced for you guys. You guys just barely got up a 40. What makes you think you can go up a 110? So 3 weeks went by. We came back again for the second week, and the second week started off pretty much like the first week. Everybody went to the top of the 40-foot pole. We played the same games everybody plays, tossed the basketball around, rotated on the pole, just getting used to being up at a little bit of height. And people were asking when we first got back, the first that week, can we climb that 110-foot pole? And Crick said, absolutely not. You guys are just rookies. Well, Friday came of that second week, and Friday morning, again, somebody asked Crick, could we climb that 110-foot pole? And to our surprise, Crick said, anybody that wants to attempt to climb that 110-foot pole, I'll be willing to let them try. I got something in the pit of my stomach that I knew I was going to do it, and that today was going to be the day that I either climbed that pole or I failed to climb that pole. But whatever happened, I was going to know if I had the intestinal fortitude to climb that pole. Because back in those days, it was a little bit different. We're talking about free climbing days, and there was no buck squeeze. In the free climbing days, if you cut out while you were climbing, you were going to go to the ground. And something else about this big pole was it was huge at the bottom. You could not get your safety around it if you wanted to. So there was actually a point of no return about halfway up before you could even put your safety around the pole to rest or stop if you needed to. It was a little bit different because if you fell off a 110-foot pole, pretty much you were probably going to, be seriously injured or die. So I grabbed my tools and I immediately ran over to that 110-foot pole. I was going to be the first guy to attempt to climb that pole. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it was no big deal and I didn't really worry about it and I wasn't scared. I'm going to tell you, I was scared out of my friggin' mind. But you know something? I free climbed that pole all the way to the top and safetied off. I reached up on top of that pole to feel for my $20 bill that's supposed to be stapled up there. And guess what? There was no $20 bill stapled to the top of that pole. Crick had just told us that as a joke. Now, if you've climbed a lot of poles, sometimes you get up to the top of a pole and it's all well and good, and you figure, how am I going to get myself down off this pole? Well, I unsafetied and climbed down, made it all the way to the bottom of that pole. I cannot tell you what an adrenaline rush that was when I stepped on that ground after climbing that pole. I had proved to myself, even though I was scared out of my mind, that I could still perform and I could climb that pole. That Friday afternoon on the drive back home, I felt fantastic. Not only had I proved to myself that I could climb that pole, I proved to those other guys that I had the cojones to climb that pole. A funny thing happened the next week back at my regular base yard. We had an insulator break on a river crossing. It got struck by lightning. And the only thing that happened to damage the insulator, and the wire just came loose and was hanging. This was a river crossing. 100-foot poles actually on piling out in the middle of a river. As we were at the boat landing and everybody's standing around, all the linemen standing around and discussing who's going to climb this pole to replace this insulator, I spoke up. I'll do it. That same lineman, Smokey, turned to me and said, "What? Do you think you can handle it?" "Absolutely," I told him. So Smokey and I climbed that pole and changed out that insulator. Because climbing that 110-foot pole the week before, that proved to me down in here that I had what it takes to make it as a lineman. Thanks for listening. Keep safe, and remember, you are your brother's keeper. Aloha.